I want you to picture something for me. Think back to your last flight,
Oh, boy.
right? You're crammed into seat 14B. The beverage cart finally clanks its way down to you, and they hand you that little foil-wrapped tray.
A breaded tray.
You peel back the lid, and, well, what are you looking at? Is it a culinary masterpiece?
Definitely not.
No, it's a bland, mushy, just completely unidentifiable disappointment. And, I mean, if you're like most people, we've all kind of universally accepted that eating on an airplane is going to be this profoundly sad experience.
Yeah, it's just a given at this point.
Exactly. We blame the airlines, we blame the caterers, but, and this is wild, what if the reason your airplane food tastes like salted cardboard is actually because the environment inside that cabin is actively hijacking your anatomy?
That is the ultimate plot twist of air travel, right? I mean, we just assume the airline caterers don't know how to cook, or, that the ingredients are just inherently low quality.
Right, they just bought the cheap stuff.
Exactly. But if you were to take that exact same foil-wrapped meal, prepared the exact same way, and eat it at your dining room table on the ground, it would taste completely different.
Really?
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that the food itself hasn't changed at all. The traveler's body has.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the physical hardware we use to experience flavor is essentially malfunctioning the second we reach cruising altitude.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the science of how flying actively sabotages our bodies is absolutely wild. We've got sources today from food scientist Dr. Abby Thiel and registered dietitian Angel Loke. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly why this biological malfunction happens, and more importantly, how you can outsmart it.
Right, we're talking about bringing your own food on a plane, which they call BYOPF.
BYOPF, love it. It's basically the ultimate travel hack for your health and your taste buds. So let's start with the hardware failure. How exactly are my senses just shutting down because I'm up in the sky?
Well, it happens in a few interconnected ways, but let's start with just the sheer physics of altitude and cabin pressure. Okay.
When an airplane climbs to cruising altitude, they artificially pressurize the cabin so, we can survive. But it's not pressurized to sea level. It's usually equivalent to an elevation of 6,000 to 8,000 feet.
Right, so it's like standing near the top of a mountain.
Exactly. And at that specific pressure level, your blood oxygen drops just a little bit, and your body's sensory receptors physically alter.
In what way?
Well, your ability to detect sweet and salty flavors drops by a staggering 30%.
Wait, 30%? That's a massive drop-off.
It is. Think about your absolute favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe. If you were to just remove a full third of the sugar and a third of the salt from the dough before baking it.
Oh, it would be awful.
Right. You'd immediately notice how flat and lifeless it tastes.
Okay, but the drop-off isn't equal across the board, is it? I remember the research pointing out something really strange about how our tongues react up there. If sweet and salty are just plummeting, what happens to the other flavors? Yeah, this is where the biology gets really weird. Bitter and sour tastes, they stay mostly the same. Your tongue detects them just fine. But umami, that rich, savory, earthy flavor you get from mushrooms, soy sauce, or aged cheeses, that actually becomes way more noticeable.
Wait, so sweet and salty vanish, but umami basically gets turned up.
Precisely. And this perfectly explains one of the greatest, weirdest mysteries of air travel.
The tomato juice phenomenon.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you noticed how many people order tomato juice on a plane?
Yes. I mean, people who would never, ever drink a glass of thick tomato juice in their own kitchen suddenly turn into vampires the second that beverage cart rolls by.
Yeah, and there is a biological reason for it. Because umami is enhanced while sweet and salty are suppressed, a savory, umami-rich drink like tomato juice suddenly just pops on your palate.
Oh, so it actually tastes good.
It tastes vibrant, fruity, and complex in the air. Meanwhile, if you order a standard sweet soda, your suppressed sugar receptors make it taste like, vaguely sweet fizzy water.
That's crazy.
Your body is basically instinctively craving the one flavor profile it can actually register.
Okay, so the artificial pressure is literally warping our taste receptors. But then there's the humidity issue, which sounds like an absolute nightmare for our mouths.
Oh, it is.
Because the air inside an airplane cabin is desert-level dry. The data shows it sits at around 10 to 20% humidity.
Right.
And for context, the Sahara Desert sits at around 25%. So you are sitting in an environment drier than a literal desert, and it just instantly sucks all the moisture out of your nose and your mouth.
Which is devastating for your sense of taste because Taste and smell are inextricably linked. It's all one interconnected olfactory system.
So it starts with the nose.
Yeah. First, the cabin pressure causes the gases inside your body to expand, which physically swells your sinuses and nasal passages.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Right. And when those tissues swell, airflow is restricted, so you're already losing your ability to smell the aromas of your food. But the lack of humidity is the real killer.
Because it dries out your mouth.
It dries out your saliva. And saliva isn't just there to keep your mouth comfortable or to help you swallow. It acts as a chemical solvent.
A solvent.
Yeah. Under normal ground-level conditions, your saliva literally dissolves the flavor molecules from your food. Once they're dissolved in a liquid state, those molecules can physically flow into the pores of your taste buds and interact with your sensory receptors.
Oh, I see. So if my mouth is completely dried out from the cabin air, my taste buds are basically locked out.
Exactly. The food might be perfectly seasoned, but the delivery mechanism is broken.
So it's like trying to brew a cup of tea without any water.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Like you can put the tea leaves in a mug.
Yeah.
The flavor potential is completely there, but without the liquid water to physically extract those molecules and carry them, the connection just can't happen. You just get a dry, disappointing mug of leaves.
That is a perfect way to visualize the chemistry of what's happening in your mouth. You have the flavor potential, but the biological mechanism required to unlock it is just out of order because you don't have the moisture. Your hardware is offline.
That makes total sense. We're sitting in a pressurized, bone-dry metal tube. Our noses are swollen, our tongues are dried out. But here's the part of the research that completely blew my mind.
The noise.
Yes, because altitude and humidity, they make logical, physical sense. But there is this invisible, totally unexpected factor actively hijacking our taste buds. And it has nothing to do with our noses or our mouths. It's the noise.
Yeah, the ambient sound of the airplane itself.
Hold on, I've got to play devil's advocate. Engine noise changes how my tongue works. I'm not buying that. How can a sound wave affect my ability to taste a piece of chicken?
I know, it sounds like science fiction, but researchers at Cornell actually tested this specifically, and the results were published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. They looked at the background noise of a typical aircraft cabin, which sits at a constant roaring 80 to 85 decibels.
Which is pretty loud.
It's essentially the volume of a noisy restaurant or like a blender running continuously right next to you for the entire flight. So they had people taste different flavors in a perfectly quiet room and then had them taste those exact same flavors in a room blasting that 85 decibel cabin noise.
And the noise actually changed the flavor.
Dramatically. Eating in that noisy environment made umami taste even stronger, but it suppressed sweetness and saltiness even further. The physical sound waves were actively altering the subject's perception of flavor.
Okay, I need the biology on this. How does a loud engine make a cookie taste less sweet?
It comes down to how the brain processes sensory information. Dr. Abby Thiel explains this through the concept of cognitive load.
Cognitive load?
Yeah. Your brain is an incredibly powerful computer, but it only has so much processing bandwidth at any given time. When you're subjected to a loud, constant, distracting noise like jet engines, your brain can't just ignore it. It is forced to continuously divert mental resources to process that auditory data. That creates a heavy cognitive load. Because your brain's processing power is limited, dealing with that noise actively reduces the attention and bandwidth your brain can pay to other sensory inputs, like smell and taste.
Wait, is this cognitive load the exact same reason I instinctively turn down my car radio when I'm driving around looking for a specific house number?
Yes, that is the exact same mechanism at play.
That is wild. Because I always catch myself doing that, reaching for the volume dial when I need to read a street sign. I'm literally reducing the auditory cognitive load so my brain has enough processing power for visual information.
Exactly.
So on a plane, the 85 decibels of engine noise is my blaring car radio, and my brain is just too distracted to read the flavors on my tongue.
Precisely. Your brain deprioritizes the signals coming from your taste buds because it is completely overwhelmed by the roaring engines. I mean, think about the opposite scenario. Why does eating in a quiet, dimly lit, peaceful restaurant feel like such a better culinary experience? It's not just about the romantic ambience, it's deeply biological. Your brain isn't distracted by sensory overload, so it can dedicate 100% of its processing power to analyzing and enjoying the complex flavors of the food.
So our bodies and our brains are literally working against us from the moment the seatbelt sign turns on. The airlines have to know this, right? If our senses are being suppressed by pressure, dryness, and the roar of the engines, how do they try to fix the food they serve us? Do they have strategy?
Oh, they absolutely know about it. The sensory dulling is a massive, multi-million-dollar problem for their catering divisions. In fact, Lufthansa even went so far as to build a specialized flight simulator just to study this.
A flight simulator for food?
Yeah, they built a fake fuselage, put people inside, and simulated the low pressure, the deafening noise, the bone-dry humidity, everything, just to figure out how to engineer their meals so people could actually taste them.
Wow.
But the airline's counterattack to this problem is a massive double-edged sword.
Because if our ability to taste salt drops by 30%, the easiest, cheapest way for an airline to overcompensate is to just dump a massive amount of extra sodium and faux flavoring into the meals.
Exactly. They are trying to aggressively punch through that sensory barrier by overloading the food with seasoning. But as Dr. Teal points out, this often backfires culinarily.
Yeah, it never really tastes quite right.
Because instead of tasting like a well-balanced, delicious meal, it ends up tasting hyper-processed. It tastes like really bad frozen pizza seasoning. It's just a blunt force blast of artificial tasting flavor that doesn't quite land right on your palate because your senses are skewed.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back here. If they are dumping extreme amounts of salt into these meals just to make us taste something through the cognitive load, isn't that a massive health concern?
It definitely sounds like one.
I mean, sitting completely stagnant in a pressurized tube for 6 hours while eating a massive salt bomb sounds like a cardiovascular nightmare. Shouldn't we be terrified for our blood pressure?
It sounds incredibly alarming when you look at the raw sodium numbers. But this is where registered dietitian Angel Lick provides a really important calming perspective on the math.
Okay, what's her take?
Well, it is true that the sodium content per ounce of airplane food is remarkably high to combat the altitude changes. However, she notes that airplane meal portions are significantly smaller than what you'd get at a typical restaurant, or even what you'd realistically serve yourself at home.
Ah, right. It's those tiny little rectangular trays. You're essentially getting a miniature serving.
Exactly. So because the overall volume of food is so heavily restricted by the tray size, the net difference in your total daily sodium intake might actually be quite negligible.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you are eating denser sodium, sure, but you're consuming much less food overall, so it somewhat balances out in the grand scheme of your daily diet.
Okay, that makes me feel slightly better about the times I've caved and eaten the airplane pasta. But the research also makes it very clear that nutrition is only half the battle when it comes to airline catering. There is also a major hygiene factor that we need to talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Because airplanes are notoriously germy environments, and airlines have faced a lot of bad press over the years for outbreaks of foodborne illnesses that were literally traced back to their onboard water supplies.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this hygiene aspect is really the core argument for bringing your own food. When you rely entirely on the airline to feed you, you are surrendering control of your nutrition, your flavor profile, and your hygiene to an environment that is fundamentally hostile to all three.
That's a great point.
You're eating food prepared in mass quantities, stored in incredibly challenging logistical conditions, sometimes relying on a plane's internal water supply that has a spotty track record at best, and consuming it in a space that physically dulls your senses. By bringing your own food, you reclaim that control.
Taking control by bringing our own food is an absolute no-brainer at this point, I'm convinced.
Glad to hear it.
But it's not just as simple as grabbing last night's leftovers from the fridge and throwing them in your carry-on, right? Because if a perfectly seasoned piece of chicken on the ground tastes like an eraser in the air, what exactly should you pack to outsmart the altitude, the dry air, and the engine noise? How do we physically hack our in-flight menu?
You have to pack strategically, almost scientifically. But, before we even get to the culinary strategy, you do have to navigate the logistics of airport security.
You're right, the TSA.
Yeah, you are completely allowed to bring food from home, but the TSA does have strict rules. The biggest trap people fall into is with liquid or gel-based foods, things like peanut butter, cream cheese, hummus, or jelly. The TSA considers those liquids.
So they're subject to the 3.4-ounce limit.
Exactly. And if you're flying from places like Hawaii or Puerto Rico to the mainland, you can't bring fresh produce due to agricultural pest control. But keeping those minor logistical hurdles in mind, the culinary world is your oyster.
So let's talk about the actual food science, because this is where all that biology we talked about earlier gets applied. Dr. Teal gave a really crucial piece of advice for packing.
Yes, she did.
She said a good rule of thumb is that if something tastes perfectly seasoned in your kitchen, it will taste incredibly bland in seat 14B. But her warning was very specific. Do not try to fix it by just dumping extra salt or sugar on your food before you pack it.
Right, because just doping salt on your food is exactly the mistake the airlines make. It doesn't magically restore the complex flavor profile. It just makes your food unhealthy and weirdly aggressive on the palate.
It's a blunt instrument.
Exactly. It's a blunt instrument that doesn't solve the underlying sensory problem.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because packing a lunch for a plane flight is basically like packing rations for a mission to Mars.
I love that.
Right. You aren't just packing to solve your hunger. You have to engineer the food specifically for the physics, the atmospheric pressure of your destination. You have to design the meal for the environment.
That is an excellent analogy. You have to lean heavily into the specific flavors and chemical reactions that the airplane cabin actively enhances. And as we discussed earlier, the absolute star of the show at 30,000 feet is umami.
So if sweet and salty are dead, we build the menu around umami. The research specifically suggests tomato-based dishes, mushrooms, or anything utilizing soy sauce. These ingredients inherently hold up against the sensory dulling, but they also suggest combining that umami with a heavy hit of acidity. Why acid?
Acidity is the absolute secret weapon here. A splash of lemon juice or a heavy hit of vinaigrette does wonders in the air.
Really?
Yeah, acidity chemically brightens a dish. But more importantly, think about what happens physically when you bite into a lemon or smell strong vinegar.
Oh, your mouth instantly waters.
Exactly. It stimulates your salivary glands to activate, which, as we established earlier, are desperately in need of moisture to help dissolve those flavor molecules in the bone-dry 10% humidity of the cabin.
Wow, that's brilliant.
So by packing an umami-rich dish and pairing it with bright acidity, you're completely bypassing the sensory roadblocks of the cabin. You're providing the robust flavor your brain can actually process, and you are chemically forcing your mouth to produce the moisture needed to taste it.
The research also mentioned one specific ingredient that works perfectly as an umami delivery system, and that's grated ginger.
Yes.
Because ginger is rich in umami compounds, it maintains its spicy, vibrant, complex kick even at high altitudes, which finally explains why practically every single person on a plane suddenly feels an overwhelming primal urge to order a ginger ale.
It makes perfect sense now.
Your body is subconsciously crying out for the one flavor it knows it can actually taste.
It's incredible how our bodies intuitively seek out what works in a compromised environment. So when you're building a menu in your kitchen to bring with you, you want to combine these core elements.
Plant-based proteins, right?
Yep. Plant-based proteins to keep you full without feeling sluggish, targeted umami for robust flavor, and bright acidity to wake up your salivary glands.
So let's turn this into an actual menu. What am I putting in my Tupperware? If you're making it at home, the experts suggest packing a cold pasta salad. But don't just use mayo. Toss it with a heavy lemon vinaigrette for that acid, add some salty olives, and use a heavy sprinkle of Parmesan cheese.
Which is essentially a concentrated umami bomb.
Exactly. That combination forces your mouth to water and punches right through the cognitive load.
That's a perfect structural meal. Or think about a farro bowl. You use farro for complex carbohydrates, load it with roasted vegetables, add cubed cheddar cheese for the umami, and top it with a very bright, highly acidic balsamic vinaigrette.
And if you want snacks, you could bake homemade berry and seed muffins using a high-protein flour like almond flour, or simply pack roasted chickpeas, crunchy edamame, or broad beans.
Angel Luke specifically emphasized that plant protein snacks are excellent for travel.
Why is that?
Because they keep your blood sugar stable and keep you satiated without making you feel heavy or lethargic while sitting still for hours.
That makes a lot of sense.
But let's be realistic. Not everyone has the time, the energy, or the culinary desire to meal prep a beautiful farro bowl the night before a 6 a.m. flight.
Definitely not me. I am rushing to the airport every time.
Exactly. So if you have to rely on pre-made food that you grab at the airport terminal or the grocery store on the way to your gate, the exact same scientific strategy applies.
What should I look for?
You look for hummus paired with fresh vegetables and whole grain crackers. You grab a yogurt parfait with granola and fruit. Or you find an egg salad sandwich on hearty multigrain bread.
Even grabbing a standard box salad from one of those terminal kiosks works, as long as it has grilled chicken breast for protein and a vinaigrette dressing to provide that essential acidity. But what if the kiosk salad doesn't have croutons?
Oh, Angel Luke offered a great pro tip for exactly that scenario. If the prepackaged salad doesn't come with croutons or dried fruit to give you the necessary carbohydrates for energy, just buy a small bag of pretzels at the register and toss them into the salad.
Oh, that's smart.
Right, you get the crunch, the salt, and the carbs all in one.
Okay, but let's talk worst case scenario. What if you completely fail? You woke up late, the security line was an absolute nightmare, you had to sprint to your gate, and now you are sitting on the plane with zero food. The beverage cart is coming down the aisle, and you are forced to eat whatever airline meal they hand you. Is there a hack to make the best of a terrible situation?
There is, and it's a brilliant little insider trick. If you are forced to eat the airline food and you have the ability to select your meal beforehand or ask the flight attendant, always opt for the diabetes-friendly or the vegetarian option.
Wait, even if you don't have diabetes and don't follow a vegetarian diet?
Yes, regardless of your personal dietary restrictions. Angel Luke points out that these specific meal categories are heavily regulated in their design.
Oh, because they're medical or dietary requests.
Exactly. They're generally engineered to be much higher in protein and dietary fiber than the standard pasta or mystery meat options. That combination of protein and fiber is crucial for maintaining your satiety, keeping you feeling full for the duration of the flight, and stabilizing your post-meal blood sugar levels.
Which is incredibly important when you're trapped in a chair, unable to walk around and metabolize your food.
Exactly. Plus, those specific dietary meals are typically mandated to be much lower in saturated fats. So even in the compromised, heavily processed environment of an airline catering cart, choosing those specific meals ensures you're getting a nutritional profile that will leave you feeling significantly better and far less sluggish when you finally land.
That is an unbelievable hack.
Yeah.
Just sidestep the standard menu entirely and opt for the meals specifically engineered for stable blood sugar and healthy digestion.
It's the best way to do it if you're stuck.
Okay, we have literally broken down the physics of flavor, the biology of our taste buds, and the ultimate strategy for packing the perfect atmospheric meal. We've learned how the desert-dry cabin air physically stops our saliva from dissolving flavor.
Yep.
We've learned how the artificial altitude suppresses our sugar and salt receptors. And we've learned how the literal roaring of the jet engines creates a cognitive load that physically hijacks our brain's ability to process taste.
It really is a perfect storm of sensory deprivation.
But we've also figured out how to fight back using the science of umami, bright acidity, and a little bit of preparation to completely beat the system. So what does this all mean? It means your days of suffering through bland, over-salted mystery meat in the sky are officially over. You now have the exact biological toolkit to take control of your in-flight experience and actually enjoy what you eat, no matter what altitude you are at or how loud the engines are roaring.
It really changes how you look at the entire travel experience. And honestly, looking at all of the science raises a really profound, lingering question for us to think about.
What's that?
Well, we've just spent this time exploring how something as simple as the dry humidity of a room or the background hum of an engine can completely rewrite what we taste, what we crave, and what we fundamentally enjoy eating. If our complex human bodies are that easily manipulated by the invisible environment inside an airplane, how much of our everyday food preferences on the ground are actually our own? And how much of what we think we naturally like is secretly being dictated by the unseen environment we just happen to be sitting in?
That is going to make me second-guess every restaurant I ever eat at from now on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you fly, remember the ginger, remember the acidity, and safe travels.